Time flies, doesn't it? Especially since the pandemic. When I look back, everything seems to happen so rapidly, like when you fast forward a VHS tape. It's been well over 2 years since Cyberpunk 2077's spectacular or tragic launch, and over a decade since the announcement trailer for it dropped. It's also been more than 2.5 years since I wanted to talk about the game, but was ultimately dissuaded by the state of online discourse surrounding it. But better late than never, I guess. In my mind, the easiest way to determine if something was worthwhile is to look at it in retrospect. See how you remember it, if you remember it, and how it made you feel. The test of time. It washes away the unimportant and forgettable and strips memories down to base. The human brain is a curious device in the way it stores information, because what it ultimately ends up doing is that the more mundane and repetitive experiences are subdued in the long run. They blend into one big grey mess. What shines through are those unique, one-of-a-kind memories. And although even those get more and more muddy as the time goes by, you'll still be able to recall them years later in sometimes surprisingly vivid detail, reminisce what you felt. As a creator, a storyteller, it's crucial to keep this in mind at all times. Doesn't matter if it's a book, a movie, or a video game, providing people with memorable experiences should always be at the forefront. Something that's unfortunately being often completely disregarded in the current AAA video game space. And that's why I'm talking about Cyberpunk today, and that's why I believe it's just as relevant as it would have been back in 2020. A question for you: what are the pillars of good storytelling? Like, what are the key areas you absolutely have to get right if you want to tell a story? I believe it boils down to 3 fundamental things, and those are world, characters, and presentation. Get these right, and even a story about how Joe and Jane went shopping on Saturday afternoon because they ran out of milk will somehow be bearable, but mess up any of these, and not even the most gripping and thought-provoking story you had in mind will be able to truly speak to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me on this short time travel trip 140 years into the past. Welcome to Lost Heaven, 1935. I won't deny that I have the biggest soft spot for Mafia. This game is remarkable for quite a few reasons. It released in 2002, developed by a bunch of inexperienced youngsters in a country where game development had literally zero support from both the government and public. Yet somehow it turned out to be a groundbreaking title that made GTA 3 look mediocre. The first time I played it was probably 2005 or 2006, something like that. And yeah, it's the perfect game for a kid to learn Czech swear words, by the way. But the point is, however, that it's been almost 20 years since then, and I still know the map as well as I know my hometown. So, how exactly does it accomplish this? Well, when it comes to urban planning of Lost Heaven, the city is divided into a bunch of different districts. You got the works quarters, Chinatown, Central Island, etc. Each district is easily recognizable either by some landmark or different architecture or NPCs that populate the streets. Distinction between them is made even more obvious by their location. The whole city is scattered around 3 parts of land in a river delta connected by 5 bridges, and the river creates clear natural borders for the districts. And even those that aren't near the coast are separated in other ways. For example, Chinatown is on a small hill above Little Italy. Oak Hill, the district where the wealthiest citizens have their homes, well, that's the highest point of the town. And it doesn't end there, because to really make your brain subconsciously differentiate between the varying parts of the city, each of them has its separate soundtrack that plays when you drive there. Pair this with the fact that in 2002, when open world games were in a very early stage, the general rule that you navigate the world based on a shiny line on a minimap, well, that wasn't a thing yet. No, in Mafia you have a compass and a map that you can open while driving. And the game trains you to start orienting based on what you see, not what the minimap tells you. And as a result, the map is ingrained into your brain in no time. Cyberpunk manages to do the same, except on a much grander scale. Obviously, being able to know all the nooks and crannies of a game world that is 4 square kilometers is one thing, but being able to do that with a world that's 200 square kilometers, well, that's a tiny bit more complicated. While you can't memorize each back alley Night City has, what you can do is to learn how to navigate the world based on your surroundings. The fact that the game succeeds in teaching you how to do that is mostly thanks to the great work that was done when creating an art bible for Cyberpunk. To establish a visual language for the setting, in cooperation with Mike Pondsmith, the creator of the original tabletop, the devs in CD Projekt formulated 4 key visual styles: kitsch, entropism, neo-militarism and neo-kitsch. They're rooted deep within the lore, mirroring the changes in cyberpunk society caused by the numerous corporate wars, ascent of hyper-capitalist consumerism and ever-growing wealth distribution inequality. With each of them being distinctly recognizable in clothing, architecture or vehicle design, the player doesn't even have to be explicitly told these styles exist, he'll notice them intuitively. While the colorful neon-soaked corners of Japantown with advertisements and plastic everywhere just scream kitsch and invite you to buy some supposedly stylish, mass-marketed fashion hit of this summer, the Corpo Plaza greets you with its imposing and unwelcoming brutalist skyscrapers bearing the logos of corporate zaibatsus. Functionalist clean lines, steel, concrete and glass everywhere, a temple of neo-militarism. On the outskirts, in the trailer parks or near mega buildings surrounded by factories, you'll immediately realize what entropism is about. All the bigger the shock when you see the sharp contrast of the neo-kitsch lifestyles of celebrities and BD stars at North Oak. Another thing I really appreciate about how Night City is built is how the environment itself tells you about its history. When we look at cyberpunk lore, Night City is basically Brasilia. It's a utopia turned dystopia, a city with a vision of a bright future that never came and became a trap instead. And the urbanism reflects this, it shows how the city evolved over the years. A great example of this here is a luxurious loft you can rent in the game. It's located in one of the upper floors of a building in Glen, which is not really a part of the city that's known as a wealthy location. And as soon as you step out of it, it's easy to see that indeed, luxurious lofts ain't what the building was originally purposed for. The upper floors were built later and the original structure is confined in this steel reinforcement. A fun fact, right next to it is a homeless camp, in case it wasn't made obvious earlier that Night City doesn't play fair. There are thousands of small stories like this being told without a single word, simply by properly done environmental design. Paired with immaculate attention to detail, with Cyberpunk's hundreds of mesmerizing adverts scattered around, plenty of news channels, TV reality shows and radio stations, all this works towards a common goal. It creates vast, immersive world that feels lived in and serves as the ideal backdrop for amazing stories. Something that CDPR proved later on even outside the game with their and Studio Trigger's widely popular Edge Runners anime. So the first pillar is clearly there, well, let's see what about the two remaining ones. This is how Cyberpunk introduces Placide, member of the Voodoo Boys gang. From the story perspective, Placide is, in a matter of fact, expendable. He doesn't play any major role, he's only a bridge that V, the game's protagonist, needs to get to Brigitte, a VDB netrunner that's their actual interest. In video game lingo, Placide's role is a very simple one, he's a mini-boss. His whole purpose is to appear, look cool, put up a fight and then ultimately die and fall into oblivion. What's interesting to me is how, despite his supposedly unimportant role, notice how effective his introduction is. When the player first meets Placide, he's at a butcher's with chicken. In 2077, in a world where the only meat you can get is synthetic and in a city that exterminated its entire bird population, running into a guy with poultry is quite the sight. Not a single line of dialogue has been spoken, but you're already intrigued and want to learn more about him. A textbook example of how to do character introduction. And it gets even better in the following minutes when Placide stops by the woman to give her chicken. A simple yet efficient way to show you that there's more to him than just a cool trench coat and that Voodoo Boys are not just a cool gang of cyber cowboys, but they're also playing a vital role for the Haitian community in Pacifica. With this amount of care put into such a minor character, it's fairly safe to assume that 2077 does an even better job with its protagonist, or should I say protagonists, and the cast of the more prominent side characters, and yeah, that is indeed the case. Similarly to their Witcher games, CDPR manages to seamlessly blend the already existing characters from the tabletop like Johnny, Rogue or Carrie with their original characters. And this is primarily thanks to something that's unfortunately not as common in the video game industry as I'm sure many of us would love it to be, and that is great and very competent writing. What really sets Cyberpunk apart though is the quest structure. 2077's characters never feel like flat pixels on screen, a simple point of interest where you head when you want to start a quest and then return once it's completed to collect your reward. Instead, Cyberpunk gives you this.
Ought to raise a glass to Scorpion.
To Scorpion.
And to Jackie.
Never look back. If you gotta kill, kill. If you gotta burn it all to the ground, then let it burn.
Thanks, for all this. Jeez, don't even feel like getting up.
Few do. But everything has its end.
Afterlife.
I thank you all for coming today. I'm not going to tell you what kind of man my son was, or lament about how much I miss him. Instead, I'll tell you a story.
It's remarkable how well these deeply human moments work. It never feels out of place, it doesn't mess up the pacing, it doesn't feel like an afterthought, it all flows very naturally, and it's one of the core reasons why Cyberpunk's characters feel so real.
3 times. Just by the heart. He was conscious when I get there. So many tubes coming out.
So, We are slowly ticking all the boxes with an immersive world and a cast of believable and relatable characters, which means it's time to get to the final pillar, the presentation, and this is the part I was looking forward to the most. Because this is where Cyberpunk 2077 does something very risky, especially for a game of its size and budget.
Well, shit. Goes for you too.
I'll stand.
This so fucking hard? Fucking ass on the fucking couch!
Make me.
Thought you'd never ask. Sit your ass down for a planet bullet in your skull.
Jack, sit down.
This ain't gonna end well, but... shit.
Well, alright. Come on. Gotta lighten up. Take a hit.
What you blowing?
Esquive. Pure as baby powder.
Black lace. Tough to get your hands on. Gotta have a good source.
What's it do?
Ups dwarfs and adrenaline to the point you feel no pain. Trip's so intense it verges on psychosis. Corps fed it to their fighting legions during the Corp Wars.
Cyber psychos pop the tabs like candy. Vaporizing it mellows the burn without killing any of the effect. Come on, give it a whirl! Better? Now we can talk. Here we go. A flathead. Model MT-0D12.
Need to see it.
Suit yourself. Fucking tricked out this thing. Dynamic thermo-optic camo armor. Full cognitive immersion with a Raven controller. Pimped out prototype actuators made of titanium, vanadium, Kevlar composite. And watch this! Fully integrated Link 2, so when the spider starts crawling up walls dangling from ceilings...
Could lose your lunch.
So what you think?
Yep, we'll take it.
Sure. Yeah. Let's see your cred.
Brick got it. It's all paid up.
Brick got it. I don't see any fucking brick around here, do you?
Come on. Can't expect me to pay for this thing twice.
And who the fuck are you to say what can and can't be? You'll pay twice because I say you'll pay twice. Alright. You want the flathead? I better see some eddies.
Seeing as you already got the eddies for it, you ought to offer us a discount. A big one.
A discount? Fuck. You know, you never did say who sent you. Never did say who you're working for.
Dexter Deshawn. That's who.
Dexter Deshawn. The lord ass who punching animal fucked half of Pacifica? He ain't dead.
No, he's alive, well, and kicking. And he sends his regards.
So I'm gonna consider my offer now. Bang.
I love this scene, it's just so well done. Anyway, this was a quick showcase of Cyberpunk's interactive scene system. And you might be asking what makes it so remarkable, why am I even talking about this, right? Well, first of all, CDPR is a studio that prior to Cyberpunk had zero experience with first-person perspective. They created their own in-house engine and developed their entire toolset specifically to create kick-ass medieval fantasy third-person RPGs. So finding the courage to make a shift so dramatic and choose as their next project a first-person futuristic RPG is already a big ball maneuver. But that wasn't enough for them. They also decided that they're gonna do it pretty much entirely without cutscenes. Not even using those cool seamless cutscenes like God of War or Hellblade has, you know, those that make it look like one continuous shot like you're watching Birdman or 1917 while Atreus can teleport off screen. No, just no cutscenes whatsoever. Now that sounds ambitious to execute well even in a smaller, more linear game. Hoping to make it work in a huge open world is pretty much lunacy. Despite everything, those mad lads actually succeeded, and it's transformative. It completely changes the way I approach the game. Because suddenly when something cool happens, I'm no longer a passenger. In some scenes like Adult Foods, when you're sitting on a couch, you're bound to one spot, but you're still fully in control of your head movement, and it does wonders for the immersion. Most of the time though, you're free to move absolutely anywhere, look anywhere, and do pretty much anything. A character might want to talk to you about something, but you're free to be teabagging a dead NPC you killed with a grenade on a nearby pavement instead of listening to them. This degree of freedom is frankly incredible, and it really shows trust. The devs trust you and assume you're not an ape. All the scenes are constructed in a way that you often feel funneled toward a certain spot without even consciously thinking about it. You're one of the actors on set, but at the same time you're also the director, changing the camera angle, moving in the space to create better composition of the frame, dynamically adapting to what the other actors do. It often creates situations where, without thinking about it, you're completely captivated by what's happening on the screen. When a character tells you something and you agree, you might find yourself doing a quick nod with the camera. When they pace the room and get uncomfortably close, you'll take a step back. This sense of immersion is further enhanced by high-quality facial animations and body language. So let's take a quick look at two quick scenes with Pan Am.
Can I help? No, you can't. I'll be done soon. The raffins left are crooked as a bag of snakes. Did you sleep all right?
Can't complain. And you? Reasonably rested?
I think you had nightmares. You screamed a few times.
Really?
Don't worry. I'm accustomed to that sort of thing. When Mitch and Scorpion came back from the war, they tossed and turned night after night. For months this went on. Whatever it is, it'll pass.
Let's hope so. Come up with anything? For Hellman, I mean.
As a matter of fact, I did. Look here.
Okay, tell me.
We're the wrench. The cutter is the AV. And the screwdriver is where the AV should bury its nose cone in the dust.
If we strip it down to the base, they're both your classic back and forth dialogue scenes. What makes them stand out is the presentation. You don't have the classic cut on a static Pan Am saying her line, then cut back at V saying her line, and so on and so forth, until the dialogue is over. Here instead, Pan Am and V are leaning on the counter, and she's using all these tools to visualize what she's planning. Moving on to the second scene, here's a point where Pan Am nonchalantly puts her legs on V. And these might seem like small things, but it does wonders as these interactions ground the characters into the world. And it also makes it feel like a real conversation two human beings would actually lead. They're not just parrots reciting their scripts. Also just a small side note, but I'm genuinely impressed by the way the eyes are animated in this game. Many otherwise visually gorgeous games fail so hard here. They have these lifeless, unsettling eyes that give a huge uncanny valley vibe. But in Cyberpunk not only do the eyes look so much better, but even the eye contact is done so well. In this scene with Jackie, for example, if you look at him, he'll look back at you. I mean, these are such small things on the surface, but I'm sure it had to be a major pain in the ass to make it all work so seamlessly.
You heard heard me?
Let it go, Takamura.
And as if the interactive scene system wasn't cool enough as it is, there's a point why I was mentioning fast forwarding VHSs. Yeah, that's exactly what you can do when you want to skip dialogues here. It just fits so well with the retro-futuristic nature of cyberpunk genre as a whole. Okay, one last thing and I'm done gushing about the way FPP is handled. What is the first-person game you can think of where you could look at your own feet? For me, I think it's Crysis, which is what, 2007, I believe? It's yet another of those seemingly small details that are ultimately pretty complex and hard to execute right. But often these details are so vital to the overall experience that without them it would break apart. Like, can you imagine playing Mirror's Edge without seeing your arms and legs? It would make the spatial orientation so much harder with all those rolls you do, ladders you climb, etc. The way Cyberpunk handles body presence is just so well done across the entirety of the game, and it would be wrong not to mention it. And it's not just the fairly obvious, oh look, there's my hand. There's also a cool little trick they use that really helps to make the FPP click. Because due to the fact that your eyes don't lie on the same exact axis as your neck, but they are instead positioned slightly more in the front, when you rotate your head IRL, your eyes don't rotate in a singular point, but rather they move around this sort of semicircle, which causes slight distortion of perspective when turning. So when you rotate your head in the game, it simulates the distortion and doesn't just rotate in one perfectly static point. You know, cool stuff. Don't know about you, but I personally really appreciate, especially in open world games, when I'm at liberty to experiment, look for creative solutions. By granting you a degree of freedom, the developers relay an important message. That they trust you, that they respect you, that they assume you're more capable than a lab rat pressing a button. It's all the more frustrating then when it's taken away from you, and that's something I've been experiencing a lot early into 2021 when I was playing Red Dead Redemption 2 shortly after finishing Cyberpunk. Red Dead's an amazing game that I thoroughly enjoyed. It has the most impressive open world wilderness I've ever seen, honestly. The whole world is filled with activities, mini-events, smart NPCs. It's frankly amazing what Rockstar achieved. Wandering the world of Red Dead 2 is an absolute pleasure because it feels like the whole world exists on its own. Regardless of whether I'm playing the game or not, I know the eagles there still catch fish, the wolves hunt rabbits and howl at the moon, the bandits are attacking convoys, street urchins are pickpocketing the Saint Denis citizens. In my mind, it's this gorgeous anachronistic Wild West diorama, a self-sustaining world of its own. Unfortunately, the biggest enemy of this gorgeous world are the goddamned story missions. And it's not the narrative part that's the issue, quite the opposite actually. It's the disappointingly outdated game design. They're so awfully scripted and on rails, there's literally no space for player input or imaginative problem solving. You're in a horse chase, take a side road that looks like a neat shortcut, thinking maybe you'll catch the guy sooner now, mission failed. Reload save? Okay, maybe this other road surely looks like a shortcut worth taking. Oh, maybe I can use my lasso and throw him off the horse that way. Okay, so what if I shoot his horse? What if I shoot him? It's atrocious. It makes my brain hurt. The whole game makes you feel like it's desired to be creative, and then these story missions kick you in the ass and spit in your face by how they're structured. Cyberpunk, thankfully, takes a completely different stance. It trusts you, it believes you possess at least a half-functioning brain, and it grants you freedom and asks nothing in return. It doesn't shout at you, hey you're free to do one of these 3 things, isn't that awesome, right? Why? Well, because it knows that that's not how real freedom looks like. You're very often given a choice without the game acknowledging it as a choice. There's no NPC will remember this message, but hey, the NPC will remember it. I'll show you 2 different occasions that I think perfectly demonstrate the respect that Cyberpunk treats you with. During the final mission of Act 1, the heist, you're given a simple choice. Do you want to head directly to your room, or do you want to explore the hotel lobby for a bit? Now, the 2 obvious paths are clear. You either go to your room with Jackie or explore a bit, he heads for the elevator and you rejoin him later. But what if we say one thing and do another? What if I tell Jackie that I'm going right to our room, but then holy shit, is that the first Strand type game creator Hideo Kojima? Mr. Kojima, I'm a huge fan of your work and shit grenades and carrying fetuses on my chest. Mind if we grab a quick selfie? Oh, wait, where's Jackie now? He didn't choose my favorite Disco Elysium dialogue option. Nah, he waits for you, briefly, then gives up and heads for the elevator without you. And here the game basically switches to the version of events that takes place when you tell Jackie you'll be spending some time in the lobby. Alright, but what if you tell him you want to check out the bar? But then you suddenly remember you'll have to cook her on, and so you quickly hop into the elevator with Jack.
Already? That was fast. Not your style.
These are obviously just tiny alterations, but it relays an important message to the player. Be creative, experiment, do what you want. Were this quest made by Rockstar, once you stumble off the beaten path, bam, you can reload your save, you damn disobedient child? Maybe you'll do as I tell you next time, huh? What I also admire in Cyberpunk is that the game never explicitly tells you that it accounts for all these different scenarios. Which is perhaps also the reason why the game received tons of criticism for its quote-unquote absence of choices. There were heaps of things that warranted criticism when Cyberpunk came out. There actually still is plenty of gripes I have with it, but seeing people complain about lack of choice shortly after the release, it just proved to me that the wave of hate that we've seen online, well, it stemmed from ignorance and malice, and there was no will to provide actual criticism. Alright, now let's see how this freedom looks on a grander scale. At the beginning of Act 2, USV will be trying to contact Evelyn, the femme fatale who commissioned the heist that got you in quite unfortunate situation. The first branch comes as soon as the quest starts. You can either call Judy or you can go see her right away without calling.
Judy, you're my one hope, the only lead I got. I gotta find her, and I know you can help me do that.
Who told you I'd want to?
Can we meet?
There was a missing.
Let's meet, please. You at Lizzie's?
Based on that, the conversation with Rita Wheeler, the Mox bouncer, changes. It actually also has a slight alteration depending on the time of day when you talk to her.
Bar's closed. Sorry, Chief. Hey! Haven't I seen you here before? Got a good memory for faces. Here for a good time.
Need to talk to Punch and Judy. She in her den.
Yep. Take the stairs down. I'll let Judy know you're coming.
Need to talk to Evelyn Parker.
Not here right now. Been a while since she has been, actually.
Know where she's to be found?
I ain't her BFF. Better off asking Judy.
Evelyn. Anyone else she might have poured her heart out to?
Do I look like her psych doc to you?
How about Judy? She in her den?
Yep. Take the stairs down.
Then, when you come see Judy, there's a difference in how she addresses you depending
What
on
do you
whether you
want?
called or not.
You just don't give up, do you? Got nothing more to say to each other. Thought I made that clear.
Or was I just too subtle for you?
The conversation that follows can go 3 different ways. You can start off being quite direct, then ease off the throttle for a bit, find some common ground, get the info you needed, and leave on good terms. The second version involves a skill check, shortens the conversation, and leads to the same outcome.
That's it. Judy, you don't need to worry. I won't lay a hand on her. Wouldn't make sense.
Fine.
All right. Evelyn's a doll. Used to work at Clouds. Sig case on my table's got the address. Take it, and once you find Evelyn, give it to her. Mega tower. Luxurious.
In this case, when you're leaving, Judy asks a little favor from you. You can either agree, disagree, or ignore her completely and walk away.
Give you a call. Okay. Thanks. Thank you, V.
The third path is you being an asshole. You get the address from Judy anyway, but she won't tell you anything else. She also won't ask you to call her if you find Av. The different information you receive is nicely reflected in a conversation with Johnny that plays afterward.
And where's Clouds? Sig case on my desk's got the address. Just take it and go.
A doll. Why am I not surprised?
In the first two paths, you learn that Evelyn works at Clouds as a doll.
Nothing should surprise you anymore.
So we're gonna hit this place, Clouds?
In the third, you only know to look for her at Clouds, and Johnny and V will speculate whether she's a regular there or a worker.
Evelyn a regular there.
Or a drone.
Seems complex enough as it is, but we're not done yet. After you're done at Clouds, if Judy asks you to call her, you'll get an optional objective. However, even if you are mean, although you don't have the objective, you can still call her. The phone conversation then obviously has two different versions to acknowledge for your previous actions.
B. You called. Promised I'd call, didn't I? Promising's one thing, keeping it's a whole other bag. Didn't expect to hear from you again. Like, ever. Don't know me then. I don't hold grudges or forget promises just because someone's having a shitty day. Sure went and proved it. Called me up just to say that. Evelyn's not at Clouds anymore. Behavioral chip was damaged. Apparently they carted her off to a Ripper dock goes by Fingers. Oh shit.
But we're still not done. Because when you meet Judy at Fingers, there are also two different versions of the conversation, depending on whether you called or not.
Hope that teaches those candy-ass Scott suckers not
Made
to
it
come
all
around
the way
no
here,
more.
huh? Must really want to talk to Evelyn.
Hello? There's a line! Nuh-uh, you ain't cutting.
Sit your ass down and wait your turn. Same thing as you. Looking for Evelyn. How'd you know to look for Evelyn here? Got friends at Clouds. Word spreads out of there quicker than the clap. Meaning? Friend told me what you dug up, so here I am.
Those candy-ass Scott suckers not to come around here no more.
Everyone's got their breaking point. Pay me what you owe me.
Hello? There's a line! Nuh-uh, you ain't cutting.
Glad to see a familiar down face. And wait your turn. I'm worried sick about her, V. Had no idea anything had happened. We'll find her. I know we will.
Something around.
And it gets even crazier, because sure, you could get to Fingers like a civilized person, walk into the waiting room and use the door. But maybe that's not your style, maybe you prefer barging in using the window, but that way you don't meet Judy in the waiting room and you first talk to her after she enters the room using the door. And then the conversation also goes different ways depending on your previous actions. See what I'm getting at? It's a constant stream of little choices, small branches, and it snowballs into gargantuan decision trees. You could do a breakdown like this for basically any quest in the game. It's pretty insane. Like, there's a slight difference in the conversation Johnny has with Alt's AI during the Sun ending, depending on specific optional dialogue choices you made during one of the flashbacks. That's like 30 hours before, not to even mention that it's only relevant in one of how many? 6, 7 different endings? It's such a tiny detail, but it's there. If there's a lesson to be learned from Cyberpunk, it's that it's worth it to experiment. that it's worth it to challenge yourself, to get out of your comfort zone and try something new. That it's worth it to try and push the boundaries of what's possible, and that the core design principles should always be centered around respect towards your audience. The folks at CD Projekt could have approached Cyberpunk completely differently and make it a very safe game that would entertain you for a few hours and then you forget it and don't ever return to it. Or scrap the idea completely, don't bother buying the rights for it and just keep doing Witcher games using the tried and tested formula from Wild Hunt, make the minimum innovations, take the Ubisoft route basically. But they didn't. Instead, they took risks in so many different fields, it's actually crazy they got away with it in AAA industry. And throughout the entire game you can clearly feel that you're treated with respect. Thematically, by how it approaches major themes in a very tasteful way, creating memorable and moving experiences without being overly sentimental. Story-wise, by offering choices and consequences without it being obviously spelled out for you. And even gameplay-wise, by always presenting you with different paths suited for different character builds and role-playing styles, even in the simplest gigs, though it's not executed without flaws. It's just a shame the same respect the devs treat you with wasn't there when the board was deciding to ship the game.